the biggest part of the iceberg.
Under the surface.
Under the surface. So up here is what we are seeing in your classrooms, which might be what? Acting out. Backflips. I witnessed one the other. Well, it was a forward flip I witnessed the other day. But the talking back, the hitting, that's all up here. But this bigger portion is what we don't know. It could, and some of it we do know. Some of it we know what has happened to the kids. Some of it we don't know, though. We know that we have a fire. A couple fires kids have experienced. We know that there's some abuse sometimes, but we don't always know all that's going on under here. Nicole and I had this conversation one time with one of your kiddos that you've inherited. We don't have any idea what's gone on underneath this surface with her in particular, and that's what causes this up here. So, but in trauma, what do you guys see in this picture? So you do see, I think most of you are seeing two things. Okay, now you're seeing both of it. So in trauma, it's all perception, and it's their perception. It might be that they survived a house fire, but it might not be. Something else might have happened in that fire. That it's more like in one of the trainings I went to. This one example she gave of a kid was actually that as they were trying to get out, the kid was running to look for his mom, and the mom had just gotten out of the shower, and he saw his mother naked. He was more traumatized by that than the actual fire. So we might know that there's been a traumatic event in their life, but it might not be the event necessarily that's affecting them. It might be something else. So it's their perception. It isn't what we see, it's their perception of what happened. Okay, so there has been a study, it's called the ACE study nationally, but Wisconsin has done their own. It's called the ACE study because it's adverse childhood experiences. So exposure to any of these before the age of 18, and actually I have a little activity for you guys to do. So just think about, because we'll go on, the next slide shows, what these adverse childhood experiences can lead to. So I want you to score this on yourself and keep it to yourself. It's just an idea so that you're seeing, because like I said, if you want to move to the next slide, Betsy. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's the adverse childhood experiences can lead to social, emotional, and cognitive deficits. And going up, there's going to be physical, but at the very top of that pyramid is an early death. So if you have 4 or more of these experiences before the age of 18, this is what. So like I said, I just want you guys to score it for yourselves to get an idea, because, then some of the kiddos in your classroom that you might have experienced some of these things, they're only 4, 5, 6, what's the oldest age we have here? 8, 9, so 10. Then, so this is before the age of 18, so some of these kids have already experienced 4 or more already. So just to get an idea, of your own ACE score, then just be able to keep that in your head when you're dealing with some of these kiddos in your classroom and what might be going on. what. And if you're interested for more detail, like what the findings were, the Wisconsin one, if you just Google Wisconsin ACE, it'll come up and you can read all the. But here you can actually see, so this is a normal brain of a 3-year-old child, and then this one who is, oh, I'm moving it. Sorry. I touched it. Darn it. Oh, there we go. So the extreme neglect, you can see the brain, and I don't know how well it shows with the color, but obviously size is, and this is an extreme neglect, a child who's experienced, but even there's gaps. Like there's big holes in there. So that's, what their brain has experienced. So just a visual to see how different that is. So it's even smaller in size as well. So what does it look like in a classroom? What are we seeing? So there's a vast, they could be hyper, not being able to sit still. They could be exaggerated responses, and freeze or refusal. So some of the time when we're seeing where they're refusing to do something, they might be frozen. It might not be that they're just being defiant and being like, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do. They might actually be frozen because when they've experienced a traumatic event, they live in that trauma. And that's where their motor, their engine is run by the trauma. It's not, they don't have the thinking process. And if we're saying, why are you doing this? They don't know. They don't have the answer. They can't tell you the answer. And they might be frozen in that moment where they're stuck right there, wherever whatever they're experiencing at that time, and they can't move forward. And in one of the trainings I went to, a really good way to think of it is, trauma is a sensory experience, so they're not in their thinking part of their brain. So in the middle of your brain, kind of, is your amygdala, or one of the women I've heard speak calls it your Amy. So Amy is our thinking, or our feeling part of our brain, where the frontal cortex is where the thinking takes part. And for one, that's not fully developed till they're 26. So they're not even capable of, until they're 26 of full, but when they've experienced a trauma, they're back down here only feeling. They're not thinking at all. So it's not that they can't come out of that sometimes because they're stuck in their aim. So they might be real rigid, they might, some of the things that we're seeing in the classroom is not necessarily that they're just being naughty, it's that they're not capable. For the last day that we had, you guys had conferences in the afternoon, you had a PD in the morning, but we had a guest speaker, or a keynote speaker that said, children will behave if they can, so if they're capable. So sometimes they're not capable because of what they've been experiencing. So we're also seeing, besides the other, they're arguing, they're fighting, they either have no boundaries at all, where they're, too friendly with people, the social skills are lacking, they either avoid touch, or, if you do touch them, they're really heightened, like, what do you, so they're unaware of their body parts in space, trouble with peer interactions, which we see a lot, So how can we help? What can we do? Predictability is the key for any kid, but especially a kid who's experienced trauma. So visual schedules in your classroom, and that can be, like Jean I know has a clothespin on hers, so like we're moving from writing now to reading to self. So she moves the clothespin down so they can see where they're supposed to be at all times. And the kids remind her if she doesn't move the clothespin in. So transitions are another issue with kids, and some kids need a preview. Okay, so in 5 minutes we're moving on to this, and you know, some it might even become as extreme as needing a timer to see this is what's going to happen if they're struggling with the transitions that much. Creating a safe environment so that when a kid is coming to you and saying somebody's doing something to them in the classroom, I know that we get busy sometimes and they're like, yeah, whatever. You're saying that all the time. But we need to make sure that we're at least listening and checking in. Positive reinforcement is huge. So the tiger tickets, all that stuff, how kids respond to the positive reinforcement. And breaking tasks into smaller parts might be, you know, sometimes if we give them a great big worksheet full of stuff, it's too overwhelming to them that they might need it broken down. I've given kids, like the math sheets I know we do, I've given kids just a row at a time sometimes, just because that's all they can focus on at the time. So, and what is another opportunity to give students time to be in control, whether it's, you know, I know some of you guys have jobs in your classrooms and that's a great opportunity for them to have some kind of leadership, some kind of responsibility, if they get an opportunity to show some kind of control in the classroom. So when they're bringing their trauma to you guys, if they talk to you guys, I know sometimes they don't, they might be talking to Ashley or Opa instead. But if they do, you know, just listen to them and try not to be like totally startled and, oh my God, that happened to you. You know, try to just react normally, normalize the story for them. And if they are talking to you and you're taking on their trauma, then make sure that you're taking care of yourself too. Whether that means, you know, if you are a person that likes to walk, you know, make sure you're getting your exercise in, or our support link, you know, we've got 6 free sessions, you know, even if it's that I have a student in my classroom and it's just really weighing on my mind, you guys have to be okay within yourselves to be okay in the classroom to help your students. And if that means that you have to call them to, even if it's, you know, that you're just that bothered by something your kids are telling you that's happened to them, we've got that service available to us. So here's where I was talking about a little bit about the brain. There's you can't really see, but here's the frontal is where all the thinking takes place. And the next slide is, so there's a lizard, cat, and human brain is visuals for, so the lizard brain only wants to eat, be safe. It's hungry, angry, and wants to reproduce. The cat brain wants to eat, sleep, play, and get affection. So that's all the cat wants. And then the human brain is the most complex, so it's capable of language and reasoning. But when a child has experienced trauma, they live in their lizard brain. So all they're caring about in their lizard brain, like I said, with the Amy, when I was saying they're stuck in the Amy, with their lizard brain, all they want to do is be sure that they're being fed and, they're not thinking about anything else. Like I said earlier, the trauma is kind of running the show. So when they're, and it's hard, I know, especially in our classrooms, we want to maintain, but, Allison's is a little friend is, when he's going off and they're kind of like in a bubble almost, and we want to make sure we don't get into their bubble. Like, we don't get into power struggles with them. We don't try to reason with them, because when they're in that moment, there's no reasoning. They're beyond, and we're just wasting our breath anyways. We just want to make sure that we keep them safe and everybody else safe. Here's some helpful websites. I can forward these to you if you want. It's just different trauma, information. I am